What's up guys, and welcome to my 4.4 updated Cerydra guide. In this video, I'm taking over everything you do need to know in order to understand and builder, including a kit overview, best Lightcones, best Relics and Planar ornaments, main set and substack goals, and finally, general team building ideas. If you have any further questions watching this video, do be sure to join the Discord in the description below, and you can feel free to ask whatever questions you have there or just chill in the server. Cerydra's basic attack does win damage based off her attack to a designated enemy. Her skill grants an ally as military merit and gives charge up to 8. At 6 charges, military merit will be upgraded to peerage and the ally's CC debuffs will be cleansed. Peerage also counts as having military merit, and with peerage, a teammate with it will gain 72% skill crit damage, 10% all-type rest pen, and skill attacks will trigger a coup de main. After the coup de main, 6 charges will be consumed and peerage will be reverted to military merit. Her ultimate gives Cerydra 2 charge and does win damage based off her attack to all enemies. If no one on the team has military merit when she ults, military merit will be granted to the character positioned first in the team lineup. Her talent will buff the ally with military merit's attack based off 24% of Cerydra's attack. The person with military merit using a basic attack or skill will give Cerydra 1 charge. Cerydra can't gain charge during coup de main. The buffed ally attacking will have Cerydra do 60% of her attack as win additional damage that triggers up to 20 triggers and will reset when she uses ultimate. Effects will only be applied to the most recently selected ally, and switching allies will reset charge to 0. Her technique will give military merit and automatically use skill on that ally that triggered battle without consuming any skill points in the next battle. For her traces, her A2 will increase Cerydra's crit damage based off her attack that exceeds 2000. For every 100 attack exceeding 2000, her crit damage will increase by 18% up to 360%. Her A4 makes Cerydra's crit rate 100%, and for one time per battle, when the character with military merit uses their ultimate, Cerydra will gain 1 charge as long as they are not at max charge, and her A6 will increase speed by 20 for both Cerydra and the teammate with military merit for 3 turns when you do use their skill on them, and the character with military merit using basic attack or skill will give 5 energy to Cerydra. Finally, for her Eidolons, her E1 gives 16% defense ignore to the person with military merit, and if you are currently in peerage, the character will additionally ignore 20% of the target's defense when specifically doing skill damage, and Cerydra using her skill on an ally will generate 2 energy for that designated ally. Her E2 makes the person with military merit do 40% increased damage, and if a military merit teammate does exist on the field, Cerydra's damage will be increased by 160%. Her E4 increases her ultimate damage multiplier by 240%, and her E6 will increase the character with military merit's all-type rest pen by 20%. The multiplier for the additional damage triggered via a military merit increases by 300%, and Cerydra also will gain 20% all-type rest pen when someone on the team has military merit. For Cerydra's best Lightcones, there are a few that work better than others if you are specifically using her with Finon, which is one of her best teammates. But first, I'm going to start it off with the general ones, one of them being her own signature Lightcone, providing 64% attack for the wearer, 1 skill point when the wearer uses ultimate to attack, and the wearer using their skill on an allied target will increase skill damage dealt for that target by 54% for 3 turns. Simple yet very effective, the massive attack buff that this does provide plus good base attack for the Lightcone is able to provide Cerydra a lot of attack, which is going to enhance her actual buff because with her trace, she's able to increase the attack of the person you are buffing, and by trace I mean talent, and usually you always are pairing her with someone that's doing all their damage off skill, i.e. Finon, Anoxa, so on and so forth, so that actual skill damage it's providing is nice. The extra skill point, this isn't too noticeable. It kind of depends on the team you're running her on, but a lot of the teams she's being ran on, the skill point issue isn't really that big, so this Lightcone doesn't do too much for that part, but it does enhance her attack buff and also gives more skill damage to the person you are buffing. So simple yet very effective, and overall her best option. Obligatory Dance recommendation because this Lightcone is just broken. 60% advance forward for the team when the wearer uses their ultimate. S5 24%. Very good for accelerating your rotations on your team, potentially netting you another turn within a cycle or just quicker than usual. Since she is able to ult decently often, this is good. For Finon specifically, you don't necessarily want to run this as it doesn't really provide a benefit unless it helps you get into ultimate to where you usually wouldn't because someone on the team might be killed. And that's kind of how I recommend using Dance Instance in general. Do be sure it nets you an extra turn or at least lets you act before where you usually would be defeated. If it's helping you with that, at least then the Lightcone is very valuable. If it's not, then you're not really getting anything out of it. Then a good free-to-play option would be the Forever Fiddle. I don't know why I forgot the name, which also increases the wearer's attack by 16% after the wearer uses skill, increases attack by 8%, stacking up to 3 times. S5, 32% attack, 16% attack increase. This would require you to use skill a few times just so you can stack it up. When you do go into battle, you automatically have 1. So right away, you would have a total of actually 48% attack, which is very solid on its own, and then it's able to increase by 16% and 16% again every time Cerydra acts to use a skill. skill. Doesn't expire either, so it just stays up. It's just a big attack buff, which is going to further amplify her actual attack buff, and I guess her own damage if you really care about that at all, which, spoiler, you don't until like really high investment. So mainly for the fact it does amplify the attack buff, this would be a good free-to-play option. You can also use Planetary Rendezvous as well, as this Lightcone does work if you are pairing her with another wind DPS, which one of her best teammates being a Noxa would be the case. Allies that are the same type as the wear will deal 12% increased damage, and it has 24%. So really specifically, if you're just using her on a team with a Noxa, I guess if you're using some combination of a team and highest scene is on the team, you can give her it as well, but that's a little less looked upon. It's mainly for a Noxa. Now, these two specific options are specifically for Final. One of them is Sparkle's Cone, as it does provide the wear crit damage, which you ignore that part, but it does provide 10% crit rate and 28% crit damage for the team. The effect does not actually recover because she can't recover skill points like that. So the reason this is for Final is because it lasts a while, because you will have the mask going into battle for 3 turns to have this effect. You need to get Final into ultimate within those 3 turns, which is extremely doable, and Final will continue to have this buff throughout the entire ultimate, because the way Final works is he takes all the buffs he has when he ults, and then it's extended throughout the entire ultimate. As he's not taking a turn, he's taking extra turns. So this is a very good buff with 10% crit rate and 28% crit damage, so that's going to be really, really good for Final, especially the extra crit rate, as it helps you ease the crit rate requirements of his build. So you definitely can run this as long as your Final gets into ultimate quick enough, which it's 3 turns, you should have no problem with that. Same thing also does apply to Robin's signature. You are able to get energy regen based off an ally target attacking. Stacks up to 5 times, but when the wearer does ult, wearer gains cadenza and gives 48% attack to Cerydra and 24% damage to everyone. So more attack for Cerydra to further amplify her buff, and also 24% damage, but it is for 1 turn. So the way you would do this is you want to save your Cerydra ult right before you go into Final's ultimate, because to use that, it'll be the next turn would expire it, but Final goes into ultimate, so you keep this buff for the entire thing. So this is another option you can use. Another one would also be Tribbies, which this one also provides crit damage and is able to give the entire team 48% crit damage while the wearer does that Presage, which the actual effect she can't necessarily do, but it does give you Presage at the beginning of the battle and also 21 energy, so the start is very nice. So you also would need to get Final into ultimate right before this buff would run out. So do keep that in mind. This would also work if you do get into ultimate while the Presage effect is on Cerydra. For best relic sets, overall one of the best and most consistent one is going to be Relieved Ordeal. 2-piece providing 6% speed, 4-piece able to increase the ally target's crit damage by 18% when the wearer does use skill or ultimate on that ally. Lasts for 2 turns, stacks with 2 times. So to do build her with as much speed as you can, that's why the 2-piece is helpful. 4-piece is just a lot more crit damage for the person you are buffing. When you go into battle, you automatically get 1 stack, and since Cerydra is going to be built fast, you can get the 2nd stack very easily. You just need to make sure you are constantly using skill as much as you can to try to keep uptime. But the occasional times you may lose a stack, it's going to be less damage, but it's still fine. Especially paired with Finon, you just would need to skill like up to 2 times anyways, which would be the beginning and then 1 after usually. And then he would be able to take all of it into ultimate anyway, so for him, it's not too much of a problem. But with someone like Anaxa or Zele, it might be a bit more difficult to keep uptime on it if you do run out of skill points in a scenario. But even then, it's still overall best in slot. However, our favorite Eagle set is also very much applicable, with the 2-piece actually applying with 10% wind damage, so Cerydra does a bit more damage. But for the 4-piece with 25% action advance when the wearer uses their ultimate. Just like I mentioned with Dance Dance Dance, be sure this is netting you something like letting you act quicker that helps you maybe gain a quicker stack for the charge, so you can get into a Kudaman quicker or 1 more than you usually would, or at least letting you act before a enemy is going to kill you, or if you're getting an extra turn. There's a lot of cases where it does apply and a lot of cases where it would work, but it's very dependent on player to player. So when applicable in those scenarios, Eagle is one of the better sets, and past that it would just be 2-piece 2-piece. So if you want the speed, you would do 2-piece speed, so 2-piece Diviner, 2-piece Warrior Goddess, 2-piece Relieved Ordeal, or 2-piece Hackerspace for 6% speed. Specifically for attack, if you want to further the buff, you can do 2-piece Navigator, 2-piece Hero, 2-piece Wind Soaring, 2-piece Prisoner, or 2-piece Musketeers. For ornaments, you also just give her whatever you can. Supportive set wise, the 3 best options would be 1 being Lushaka, the most common, 5% energy regen rate, and 12% attack for the character position first. So as long as they're attack scalar, which usually they always will be, the only case would be like the specific Might Aid part, which I'll talk about more in the team section. If they benefit from the attack, this is overall the other better one. Specifically with like Anaxa, the Penacony set would work with 5% energy regen rate and 10% damage. You just need to make sure they're the same type as the wearer, so in this case, wind. And if you do really want to get that first action to stack up your skill as much as possible and as quick as possible, then Von Walk for 5% energy regen rate and 40% advance forward when entering battle, as long as the wearer speed is 120 or higher, which will be always. So this is just to accelerate stuff quickly, you know, especially paired with Finon to try to get him into ultimate as fast as possible. Von Walk also does work in that sense. For the main sets on the relics, for the body, you run attack percent, for the feet, you run speed, for the orb, you run attack percent, and for the link rope, you run energy regenerate. Specifically for Finon, if you do think you can defeat the battle within that first Finon ultimate, which is usually a goal, instead you can run attack percent link rope and or even attack percent boots just to get the highest buff possible, but that's just if you think you can finish in that first Finon ultimate. For any other character, you would be sticking to speed boots and energy regen rope. And then for substats, you just focus on speed and attack percent. Speed, get it to as high as you can, ideally around 140 because in battle that becomes 160, but if you can get it to really high amounts, especially paired with like Eagle or Dance This Dance, or both even, getting it to around 160, 170 plus a 20, and that's going to take you to further breakpoints is always going to be very good for turn. If you're specifically doing the Finon setup with link rope attack percent and boots attack percent, then you can ignore that step entirely. But for anyone else, you would just focus on the attack percent after that. I already mentioned the speed goals, but if you are looking for a rough amount of attack, it does depend on what Lightcone you're running. If you're running a 5-star Lightcone, you're usually looking at around 3,500 attack before battle. With Signature, you're looking at around 4,200. With a 4-star Lightcone, you're maybe looking at as close to 3,000 as possible. But do remember, especially if you're running the free-to-play Lightcone that she has from the event, that one's going to increase attack percent in battle, so it's going to look a lot higher than it does outside of battle. So for attack, there's also no necessary limit because the more you get, the further the buff will become. So first is your speed goal, just get it as high as possible. 140 minimum, so it's 160. And then if you're running really high D2D Eagle setups, you can get it even higher than that. And even if you're not, you still want to get it as high as possible. And then focus on attack percent also as much as you can. For general team building, Cerydra isn't a super versatile character, but she does have some very strong teammates still, and the ones that she was released around and made for, those are still the ones that apply. I'm gonna use Finon as the first example, as he's going to be the most popular, so Finon would be the main one you look at. Last two slots depend on what you're doing. With Finon, I always recommend Sustainless because he's just not someone to really run a sustain. It is quite a big damage drop off at any investment. So one of the more common teams would be Cyrene, and then last slot would be another support. If you have E2 Cyrene, Sparkle is going to be like the best for this slot because her amp is just insane. So for an E2 Cyrene team with this would be the best Finon team you can possibly run. Then sub out accordingly if you want to have another air because you don't have E2 Cyrene in that case and you don't want to actually have the setup. Or actually, first, let me mention another E2 Cyrene teammate, that is Martanix Blade. He's really good in that slot too. But in this case, you could run RMC, you can even run someone like Tribby, Cypher, so on and so forth. And then when you look at lesser Cyrene teams, so just more of not having her, so you don't have that requirement, Sparkle always wants to be in that slot. You usually want to have teammates that can target Finon, but honestly, if you already have two, which is one Cerydra Sparkle, you can honestly get into Ultimate with one AoE buffer, so Tribby also works, and also Cypher. Once again, Mortanix Blade especially as well. But if you want another targeter, you can use RMC or even Sunday, so you get a bunch of crit rate. And the same ideas here do apply to the next teammate, which I'm going to talk about, which is Anaxa. So practically everything I mentioned for Finon does apply to Anaxa as well. Serene, I don't know why I said Serene, Cyrene is a lot more crucial on this because this is like the trio that just brute forces like all content, and Anaxa really wants these two on his team. Last thought would depend, in this case, a sustain is a lot more likely with Anaxa. But with the same teammates I mentioned, you can run a sustain the slot with E2 Cyrene, you can run Sparkle or even Blade. Less so Blade here just because Anaxa would work a bit differently, but still is good. But Sparkle is good, especially because you can get more out of Cyrene action advanced turns, which is more stacking for Cerydra. But like I said, you can apply a lot of other teammates, like you can use RMC here, you can use Tribby, so on and so forth. And the last one I want to talk about is going to be Zele, especially after a Nova Flare. Cerydra is a very potent teammate, and these are two teammates you really want for her. Sparkle and Cerydra are very irreplaceable for Zele, especially for best performance. And last slot would be a sustain, again, usually permanent Terry Donning or also full especially after the buffs. Well, the buffs didn't really change much to be honest, but still is there. And then sustain this, you would use the classic, you can use Tribby, RMC, so on and so forth. And the last thing I want to talk about is Maidays. So Maidays teams are looking like Cyrene and Hyacine usually. So the team would usually just look like this. And this is usually recommended if you do have E1 or higher Maiday, because then the God Celebrity God is so much more potent, and you want to time your coup de mans for when you do use the God Celebrity God from the Cyrene buff. When you have E1, it becomes full AoE and does more damage. That's why it's a lot more focused. At E0, it's less needed, and even here, you have more replaceable options, like you can still put Tribby there, but Cerydra does work in that sense, especially if you do have E1 or higher Maiday. As most people are going to run Lushaka on Cerydra, just be sure you're running something else in this case, because Lushaka's attack buff is not going to do anything for actually anyone on this team, as they're all HP scalers. And that is the full 4.4 updated Cerydra guide. I do hope you found this video helpful. If you did, drop a like, it'd be greatly appreciated. If you're new to the channel or haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell for future videos like this, along with all the tips to start content. Remember to join the Discord, and I'll see you next time. Peace out.